I'm Helen.
I'm Miss Sinclair.
And I'm Edison. Y'all better grab your extra large popcorn. We are in the thick of things with great films.
I am open and positive.
I don't like it.
Let's throw on these boxer gloves.
Let's do it.
Let's fucking do it.
Welcome to Talk Movie to Me, a weekly podcast where we do a deep dive on a new release that's just hit theaters or streaming.
We are so excited to welcome you to Season 7 of Talk Movie to Me. Guys, can you fucking believe that? Season 7?
I can't believe we've been doing this for 7 years.
I can't, and we're still friends. I can't believe it. We're all still friends.
I know, honestly, and we are so thankful that you've been tuning in to listen to us for all 182 episodes and counting. Truly, this is such a love for us to record this podcast for you, but it's also a lot of work. So for Season 7, we are embracing the edit and paring Talk Movie to Me down just a little to make it a bit more manageable for us, sure, but also to provide you with a more concise, digestible episode length. So this season, each episode we're going to focus on one major new release film, and sure, there may still be some special format episodes or double features along the way. Also new this season, you can listen to the episodes on our newly launched YouTube channel as well. And we'll post a link in the notes of this episode. We are so looking forward to discussing great films together, and there are a ton coming up this season. So let's get right to it. Helen, take it away.
Priscilla Beaulieu Presley was married to Elvis from 1967 to 1973, and together they had one child, Lisa Marie. The couple married when Priscilla was 21, though they met when she was only 14 and he was 24. Sofia Coppola's latest feature starts here, with ninth grader Priscilla, played by Cailee Spaeny, being sought after by the king himself, Elvis, played by Jacob Elordi. The script, also written by Coppola, is based on Priscilla's memoir, Elvis and Me, from 1985, and contrary to Baz Luhrmann's Elvis, Priscilla shows the king of rock and roll in a different light. Priscilla asks the question, if you're married to the king, does that make you queen, or are you just another one of his subjects?
Helen, yes, it does.
It's a pretty good question, right?
It is.
First impressions, Edison.
Okay, so this film opens up with a series of these extreme close-ups, just sort of giving us snapshots of the world in which the story's set. There's these painted toenails walking across a very plush shag carpet that I was like, oh, I just want to snuggle up into that. There's a white grand piano, some lipstick being applied, a wingtip of eyeliner. It's very 60s and very intimate and sensual. That's not surprising, really, because we're familiar with Sofia Coppola's work, and that works as a descriptor for a lot of her stuff. But all these close-ups, I can't help but think about it. It's such an intentional choice, and even right at the very beginning of this movie, I'm trying to think about what she's trying to convey or say here. Like, we know the movie is about Priscilla and Elvis. These are two of the most famous showbiz people, like, ever in popular culture in America. And so these little snapshots, it's like, is she trying to say at the beginning, like, we'll never be able to tell a whole part of their story, only little pieces, only little snapshots? Who knows, right? But either way, it made me think right off the bat, and I thought that's a super welcome way to start a film. I was really invested right from the get-go. How about you, Sinclair?
Well, my first impression of this movie is really my experience in the theater, which I was texting you two about. I went to see this one evening this week, and the theater was full. It was packed with really young, attractive-looking people. I was sitting there and I thought, am I too old to be seeing a Sofia Coppola movie, a director who I grew up watching, who introduced me to the wonders of Josh Hartnett? I did worry a little bit. I'm like, is this movie going to speak to me, or is Sofia Coppola really trying to reach the younger generation with this movie? But it could have just been me feeling old.
That's interesting. Did you have your chili? Because that might have explained it.
I didn't have my Tim Hortons chili, but normally I do go to a matinee where I'm with the elderly, where I'm with my people.
No, I will say I went to a matinee and it also skewed young.
Well, mine didn't. I was at a matinee today, and it was like a Theater 8 crowd.
Wow.
Yes,
okay.
It was an elderly crowd. You're with
it was an elderly crowd, and I did bring in a salad from Freshie.
But then we're not even that old, but we aren't that young.
But we're
That's
not
the
young
thing.
anymore. Like, we're not like the young people.
Yeah,
No.
yeah.
Like, every single day, something happens where I'm like, I'm just not cool, and I don't know what's cool anymore.
Yeah, but
That
apparently
time has
Sofia
passed for me.
Coppola is cool.
Always.
Yeah.
You know, or
Yeah.
What did
well,
you think, Helen?
So my theater, there was an older crowd. It was the Tuesday matinee, so the cheap day to go to the theater, but it actually was pretty full, which I was surprised by because I wasn't sure about, the hype of this movie. I'm like, are people seeing this movie? Theaters just have been less full since COVID. It's just been so different. So it was nice to see a lot of people in the theater today. Mine wasn't full, but there was a fair amount of people there. The first image that I think of the start of the movie is the painted toenails on the shag carpet, and how just the style is so prominent from the very beginning. And I felt very enveloped by the style right off the bat. And I was really excited by that because it felt sort of just like warm and like plush and pink. And I was like, oh, okay, I can live here. This is nice. It was very romantic. Yeah.
So do we want to get right into the storytelling?
Yeah. Yeah, let's do it.
So I loved in the intro, Helen, that you mentioned about you drew a direct comparison with Baz Luhrmann's Elvis, because how can you not, right? And I know we're not.
I mean,
this
I've
is not
tried
an
to forget
invitation,
it.
Sinclair.
I'm not.
for you
No,
to,
and I'm not saying anything. No.
But yeah, that film was huge last year, right? And Austin Butler was everywhere as Elvis and all the rest of it. But it was really fascinating. I will say, we all know Elvis Presley. He is one of the most famous pop culture icons ever. But I left that film being I don't know really anything about Elvis. And I've never really known Elvis. I don't know that I've seen interviews with Elvis, or I've never read any books about him or anything. So I don't really know that much about him. These films could not have been more diametrically opposed in how they presented him.
Yeah.
That was Elvis the victim. This was Elvis the predator and Priscilla Stockholm syndrome. And
Oh, God.
wild.
Yeah, well, I think for the first little bit of the movie, something that really captured me was the portrayal of that sort of first love and young love, especially as a girl. And, it's one thing to be 14, 15 and you fall in love for the first time, and it's an older guy and he's so cool and you're he likes me. But imagine that's fucking Elvis Presley.
Surreal.
How does one even comprehend that?
Yeah.
And I thought that Sofia Coppola did a really beautiful job of actually making you feel how that feels, and you can't sleep and you can't focus in school and you're not hungry, and I really felt that oh, this is all encompassing, this is just taking over your life, and now the only thing that matters in your life is this person.
I felt the exact same way. I was just imagine just being in high school and literally one of the most famous people on earth, who's also one of the most famously sexy people on earth, is into you. It would be so truly bizarre. So truly deeply bizarre. Also, she was 14.
Yeah. I mean, I get that from seeing that from her perspective, how you would be excited about that. But, as an audience member, you're watching it, and it doesn't hide the fact that she's essentially scouted. I mean, Elvis
She's
isn't
groomed.
there. Yeah, it was like having a scout go
For
out,
sure. Yeah.
find somebody that looked like her, that appeals to him and what he wants, and bringing her back to his place. She was essentially scouted.
100%.
I did like how she just let us kind of see that for what it was, and that's what it was. But I did like seeing it from Priscilla's perspective. It helps you understand how you would be sucked into that as well. I mean,
And even her parents too, they're wrestling with the fact do we let our daughter hang out with Elvis Presley? And in my mind, I'm oh my God, she's 14 and he's 24. What are you doing? But I also can understand the well, Elvis Presley wants to hang out with our daughter. Like, I can kind of understand that, like, this is sort of like an incredible opportunity.
And you also think, okay, Elvis isn't going to do anything. Like, he's not going to risk his career by doing something, you know, inappropriate or untoward or whatever.
I think parents were just less aware at the time. It was the same thing with serial killers, how people would hitchhike and just get into cars. I think it was, you know, when saying it's a different time isn't an excuse and it doesn't make it right or anything, but these things they just happened.
I don't know. Parents let their younger kids hang out with Michael Jackson too.
Well,
I think
the same thing, right?
It's
like,
the fame thing. It's like people just get blinded or somehow tricked by fame, especially when it's like extreme fame. You know, Elvis isn't like some C-list actor. He's fucking Elvis Presley.
Yeah. And I mean, we all have the unfortunate quality of us applying morals to celebrities for some strange reason. You know,
I will say I found this film to be deeply unsettling. It started at the beginning and it didn't let up. Honestly, at the end of the movie, I said to my friend Shawnee, who I went to see it with, you know, I've been uncomfortable this entire movie. There's always this sort of air of dread or anxiety or anger or discomfort or something. It never lets up. I found it to be like asking a lot of the audience. And it's not a joy to sit through this movie. And that's not necessarily a complaint. I appreciate that as a creative choice. And I think that's obviously Sofia's intention with the film, at least how I saw it, to create that affecting atmosphere where you feel smothered by it, where you feel like Priscilla's perspective, right? And it succeeded in that. But I'm trying to think of the last time I watched a movie where it just didn't let up. I was just like, through the whole thing.
It's because if you've ever been manipulated and you watch someone young being manipulated, you feel for her because you know that this is going to be a life lesson.
Her arc as a character in the film and as a human being isn't that satisfying. Like, that was something where I walked away and, like, yes, she divorces him, but I didn't feel necessarily like, oh, she becomes so independent after this, or she like is free from this person. Like, it doesn't feel that way. And I don't necessarily think that that's how Priscilla felt. Like, I read something about, you know, her and Elvis leaving the courtroom after they divorced holding hands and like they were still friends, you know. So I think that is part of the feeling of being unsettled, is that you're like, this is not a black and white movie. Like, it doesn't make you feel like he is like very blatantly like the villain and she's the protagonist or anything like that. Like, it lives more in the gray. And I am still kind of wrestling with how I feel about that. I'm like, would I have liked this movie to take like a stronger perspective on that, or is it nice that it's a little bit more like nuanced and that we can kind of like take it however we want to take it?
Well, I think it's real, you know, like she said herself in an interview that I read, you know, I did not divorce him because I didn't love him. He was the love of my life, but I had to find out about the world. And after he died, she said, I wanted to die. She wrote that in her memoir. She has always spoken fondly of him and continues to this day. And it was a primary concern of hers that he not come across too bad in this film when they were making it, which is interesting because you watch it though, and you're like, and you're right, Sinclair. It's like we're applying our own morals and our own hindsight and our own experiences to it from an outside lens. But you're like, I don't know. I'm watching the whole film, and the one part that was missing for me was an understanding more like beyond just her being manipulated as to why she was still with this person. I didn't get the love. I just saw him as a manipulator, and I saw her as someone who was like being manipulated and trapped. But I didn't get the like love that she talks about as being very present there too, really.
I had the same thought that like it would be nice to see some more love and like the growth of that within their relationship.
Or the other parts of her life as a free person. She talks all the time too about like she had a bunch of girlfriends and she would go out for dinner and go out and do stuff in the town, and she had her classes, and like she had other elements of her life, and there's little glimpses of it in the film.
I think it's hard to watch this movie, and especially from a lens of 2023, and just not feel like, oh my God, you were groomed and this guy was a pedophile and like, did he rape her? I felt like that particular scene where we see that she, you know, the first time she sleeps in his bed and then she's asleep for 2 days, you can't watch that and not think like, did he rape her?
Well, and he was feeding her drugs.
Yeah, like
too.
You can't not at least think that when you see that scene. That's not definitive at all, but it's just like there's so much ick.
Yeah. Well, it just
movie
goes back to her being 14 at the beginning. Like, you can't not see it.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was wondering watching this and I love Sofia Coppola, but if she has some sort of like Arrested Development with storytelling.
Yeah.
Most of her films focus on a young girl,
Right.
and this young girl finding her identity in the shadow of a very successful man or an older man, and she does that really, really well. I think Lost in Translation is an amazing film, but a lot of her films focus on a young girl being lost, and I think Priscilla is I think it's a good movie, and there were elements of her coming of age that are really relatable considering she's with Elvis. She managed to kind of dial them down into relatable moments, which I thought was really good. But I do wonder if Sofia Coppola, because she's over 50 now, if she's going to move into telling stories of more like fully realized women at later stages in their lives, or if she's going to keep doing this story
Right.
over and over.
I think that that's very common with a lot of artists. I think especially artists who've experienced something very profoundly, I think that there's something definitely kind of autobiographical in all of this. You have to think about, like, what was her life growing up with Francis Ford Coppola as a father, and like, was she traveling all around the world? Was she isolated a lot of the time, and all of this? And I think a lot of the time artists continue to mine their sort of foundational emotional arcs for their art, for their stories.
And she does this really, really well.
Oh yeah.
But it just had me wondering for her next film and her next film, you know?
Well, and kind of to that point, I think something that left me feeling unsatisfied with this movie is that we don't see Priscilla past the relationship at all.
Yeah. And she becomes more of a celebrity in herself and a businesswoman. And she does all these things, philanthropy. She does all these things after Elvis, which is really interesting. And I just wonder if we'll ever get those stories, you know?
Right. And it's hard to see a young woman in turmoil like that and then not get at least a little bit of a payoff of like, and then she becomes her own person and hear how she succeeds in that way, right?
Yeah.
Like I get that this was telling just one specific part of her life, but it did leave me feeling like, okay, then what?
What now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Cue Dolly Parton, I will always love you, close the gates, it's done.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. Well, it's a good question to ask yourself, like storytelling wise, what do we walk away with from this? Because I enjoyed watching it, but story wise, I honestly haven't thought about it since. Really.
Yeah.
I just thought about it today because we were going to talk about it, but it's not a movie that stays with you really and lingers.
Why don't we get into performances?
Absolutely. Do we want to start with Cailee Spaeny as Priscilla?
Sure, yeah. There is just a very like raw and like available vulnerability in her performance that I found just super engaging, and I was like happy to just watch her facial expressions, like it was she has like a very, I think, raw talent about her that I really liked, and I had not even heard of her before this, so I thought she was great.
I did too. I mean, she anchors the film. Obviously, Priscilla is the center of the story. She is our guide. It's her name in the film's title. So I thought that Cailee, especially for being somebody who, we're not that familiar with, she really handled that masterfully. I thought that there was a real, like, natural subtlety in her performance, in her mannerisms, the way that she carried herself. It did change, even though you're right, we didn't get, like, the full arc of Priscilla, the character. But there was a pretty marked change between her as 14 years old and her at the end. Yeah. And it never for a moment feels forced. It was just so kind of finely tuned. I really like that she's warm and she has that like enigmatic quality that obviously Sofia is drawn to in performers like Nicole Kidman or Kirsten Dunst, etc. It's just something kind of mysterious. I will say the difference in size between her and
Comical.
Jacob Elordi was comedy. You wrote that in the text. You were like, he's a giant.
So tall. He's tall.
6'5" and she's like 5 foot.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was like, it definitely, I mean,
it's so noticeable.
It's so noticeable. It's a choice. It certainly adds to her
And
looking like a tiny doll and him like
14.
a giant. Totally. The power dynamic of it all, the age difference. Yeah. But like, it was really funny.
Yeah. She reminded me so much of Shailene Woodley. I just
Same.
kept
She looks like her.
seeing Shailene Woodley. But she has been in things that I've seen. Like she was in Mare of Easttown.
Yeah, that's right.
I guess I've seen her and stuff. I've just never
has made an
didn't know her
impression on
name,
me.
you
I
know?
guess yeah. She was really really great.
And I think it could be easy too to like fall into a bit of a trap of like an annoying young naive girl, and there's no part of her that feels like that.
No.
Like I get it. I get why she feels the way she feels. You're not like, oh, you're so stupid and so young, you know? You're just like, yep.
Yeah. You have to have a naive
understand.
but also wise beyond your years.
Right.
As he said, your daughter is very wise
Mature
beyond
for
her
her age,
years.
Yeah.
Sir.
And as far as Jacob Elordi, you know, I thought he did as good as he could do with Elvis. I feel like, as you said earlier, like this wasn't really a look at Elvis's inner world. We got basically like Elvis, two iterations of Elvis. Elvis with a bit of charm, and then Elvis as a manipulative, sort of violent asshole.
Mm-hmm.
And so once again, just like kind of my complaint about the Elvis biopic, which is more egregious in the film that's titled after him, I still don't know kind of who Elvis is after this film. I have an entirely different perspective on who that person might be.
Right.
But I will say that Jacob Elordi does have a ton of charisma. He holds the screen. He's gorgeous. And
He really looks like Elvis too.
yeah. And his voice was great.
Yeah. I thought he was really good. And I was a huge fan of Austin Butler in the Baz Luhrmann Elvis. But like, I was like, maybe I might actually like Jacob Elordi better.
Yeah, I don't even think that it's worth even comparing the two because what's being asked of them is so vastly different.
Yeah.
I mean,
very different.
Jacob Elordi, I think that Sofia Coppola did a really good job of just creating and shooting an idol.
Yeah.
It didn't even matter if he was Elvis or not. You know? It just had to be a charming, kind of mysterious, intoxicating, narcissistic man. You know, that's really all that needed to be there. And thank God, because not for 1 second could I picture Jacob Elordi actually doing any sort of like Elvis movements.
Yeah,
so
I was like, there's no way he's gonna be like 1 for the money, 2 for there's just no way. There's no way. And with Austin Butler, you know, that was a full physical performance.
Yeah.
What was being asked
Very
of them
different,
was just completely different. And I'm just thankful that they actually didn't try to incorporate that into Jacob Elordi's performance. It would have I just don't think it would have worked. Jacob Elordi did say that he ate just like pounds of bacon for this role, and that he's just lucky that he's tall and slim because it just kind of spread out over his body.
But see, that is such a like Gen
like,
Z TikTok thing to say. I swear to God.
Yeah, that's such a, you know,
with his
buzzwordy
90s like pseudo mullet, like he's so in his baggy 90s pants. It's like, dude, you look like the gorgeous guys from like 1993.
I'm telling
it's
you,
wild.
the guys in the movie theater had his haircut, like his current like punky mullety haircut, and his earring. They were all emulating Jacob Elordi in that theater.
It is a little concerning though, because he's most well known for Euphoria, and he's like a monster in that show.
Yeah.
He's amazing as an actor, but that character is like a pretty disgusting monster. And like,
but you can see how his role in that he would be able to bring some of that into this like dark side of Elvis. It kind of works.
I thought it was great casting. I actually like when I first read about it, I thought like, oh, the guy from Euphoria, really? And then the second I saw him in this and he started talking, I was like, oh, he sounds great. He actually really looks like Elvis. And then that sort of menacing, like controlling, manipulative thing that he does in Euphoria and does in this. So it worked.
As long as there was no performing as Elvis, like even was the moment where he was on the piano doing that, and I was like, no, that's taking me out.
Yeah.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
Okay, so why don't we jump into technical, because that was something that I think really stood out for me in this film. You know, it's interesting. We had the Elvis biopic last year. Baz Luhrmann, a very stylistic director. Sofia Coppola, also a very stylistic director. Totally different though. But I thought this film succeeded really, really well on this, and certainly in all of the creative, like the art department type stuff.
Oh, totally. That was my favorite part of this movie, was the style. Yeah. Like I could have just taken a bath in the style of this movie. Like it was so
100%.
chewy. Like I just wanted to eat it. Like
it was literally sensual. Like it was, you could smell it and feel it. It was incredible.
Yeah. Her aesthetic is one of the best parts of watching her movies. I'll be honest. And it's so just dreamy and introspective, and it's feminine, and it's
hazy
gorgeous and hazy, and it's its own filter. It's beautiful, and you get sucked into it. One thing I found really interesting technically is that there's no Elvis music.
Yeah,
oh my god! But the soundtrack was
the rights
fucking amazing.
Yeah, she couldn't get the rights to it, but it works.
No, I didn't even notice. I didn't even notice till I read that after. I was like, oh, there wasn't any Elvis music, but the music she used was perfect.
Yes, it was for the better, because it just allowed for her style to be more front and center, and the music choices for her films are really part of the Sofia Coppola experience. Like I did a 4.5 hour drive today, and I put on there's on Spotify Sofia Coppola Core, and then there's also just Sofia Coppola soundtrack playlists, and it's perfect for driving because it is very dreamy and introspective, and it's like perfect for fall. So I had a real Sofia Coppola drive today.
I absolutely love that. I will be downloading that playlist immediately. I will say that I have been listening to the Priscilla soundtrack nonstop since I watched this film. It's perfect. All those songs, like it's just so. It was absolutely a highlight of the movie for me, for sure.
Yeah, the setting was interesting too, because you would think it would be a lot more extravagant, but the house she was in Graceland, it honestly did feel a bit claustrophobic, and
she's in a
too
cage.
like showroom, and except for his bedroom, his like Sex Panther bedroom where no sex was happening.
I know.
I did laugh because Cailee Spaeny, she gets to do this movie with Jacob Elordi, and it's like the one role where he's a prude.
I know.
She's probably like, damn it.
There was a part of me that was like, I do want to see them get it on.
Yeah, I know. But he's like, Elvis was in his prude stage. So
yeah.
Sorry,
and we
Cailee.
didn't even see like that was also a choice, like because
sure.
I know that he was holding back. That was part of the manipulation, or just part of their whole thing.
Yeah.
But like Lisa Marie exists. They had sex clearly.
He
So,
had a weird thing about having sex with mothers.
Yeah, he wouldn't. That's right.
Yeah, he
Really?
couldn't. Yeah. Yeah, he was kind of like really weird about virginity, and he wouldn't. Once a woman had a child and she was a mother, it was like, done. It was done sexually.
He really needed to go to therapy.
Deeply.
Yeah. I mean, the style, the art, the set deck, the costuming, and the hair and makeup too, because that is really what. Her performance is great, but that really does help her age, because she truly does look 14 at the beginning of this movie.
Yes.
And then she needs to look like a 27-year-old or however old she is by the end. And she looks very different when she's in her LA phase in the 70s.
Yeah,
and
very
she's got
70s,
that middle part, and she's tanned. I was like, she actually looks like a different person.
Yeah, and the costume design and hair and makeup really did tell that story of the progression.
Yeah.
For sure.
And being able to capture those photographs too, those very iconic Elvis and Priscilla photographs is really, really incredible. Yeah.
And shout out to Toronto because it was all filmed here.
Wild.
Woo-woo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is the last word on Priscilla, Helen?
I liked this movie. It did leave me feeling like I would like more satisfaction just in terms of like the liberation of Priscilla and seeing her as a fully formed independent woman. But the style is really what hooked me into this movie and what I would recommend people to see it for, because I think that the style of this film is just so captivating. And yeah, I mean, it's a fun movie to start off season 7. Yeah. Sinclair?
Yeah, I think this is a good movie. I don't think this is on the level of Lost in Translation, you know, not to compare it to that, but I do think Lost in Translation is her great work. But this is a good movie. It is really intoxicating to watch while you're there watching it. You might not be left with a lot when you leave. And I do look forward to seeing what else she does in her career after this one. I am curious about what story she's going to tell for her next film.
Yeah, for me, I mean, I thought this was a really well-made film. As we've said, it's gorgeous to look at. The performances I thought were great as well. The way that the movie just puts you in this place of feeling unsettled and a bit anxious for the entire time, that was very effective, and I respect that. But I do feel like there was something lacking, something missing. There was almost like this tunnel vision focus on Priscilla's like isolation. And those lighter moments, if we maybe got a sense of the joy or love that she felt in her life as well, would have made the more traumatic moments in her life more like complex or something for me, rather than me just spending this whole film being like, you in danger, girl, run. Like, what are you doing? You better run.
Yeah.
That being said, I am definitely glad I saw it for Cailee Spaeny's performance and for that just sumptuous, beautiful way the film looks. I do think that we're going to see this at the Oscars for like the art department type things. Yeah. But great way to start season 7.
Yeah, we're back.
We're back.
Baby.
Well, this has been our first episode of season 7 of Talk Movie to Me. If you would like to get in touch with us, our email is talkmovietome@gmail.com. Follow us on Instagram @talkmovietome. Rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Helen.
I'm Miss Sinclair.
I'm Edison.
Are you?
Are you Edison? Are you still Edison?
Sorry.